Under the violet canopy of Xyrella 9, the air shimmered in waves that bent the light and made the jungle seem alive in ways that unsettled even the most experienced explorers. It wasn't just the heat, though it was hot enough to warp the edges of your vision. It was the way the plants leaned toward you, the faint chittering from nowhere and everywhere, the oily tang in the air that made your tongue feel like it was coated in rubber. Most species in the Galactic Survey Corps considered the toxic jungle a death sentence. You didn't get assigned here, you got sentenced here. And that's exactly what happened to our team. We'd been caught in the wrong political storm at the wrong time. Captain Varn, our Kevlin leader, had mouthed off during a high-tier meeting with the sector minister. One insult later, we were on a shuttle to Xyrella 9 with research orders. Everyone knew that meant, go die somewhere far from me. The Corps said our mission was to collect viable samples of flora and fauna for toxin analysis. In reality, it was an execution wrapped in a thin layer of bureaucracy. And to make matters worse, they had assigned a human. Private Marcus J. Hall. Brown hair, medium build, unassuming at first glance, until you noticed the way he scanned every inch of the world around him like it was a chessboard. Humans had been in the Galactic Coalition for less than 2 decades, and their reputation was still evolving. Most aliens found them unpredictable, occasionally brilliant, and often dangerously reckless. I'd been working alongside dozens of species in the Survey Corps for years, but I'd never met a human up close until now. We weren't friends. Not yet. Our landing zone was a steaming sinkhole of twisted vines, massive ferns with black leaves, and fungus the size of landing drones. Our suits were sealed, our air scrubbers running at full capacity. The first step onto Xyrella 9 felt like walking into a predator's mouth. My 3 eyes kept scanning the shadows between the stalks. Nothing moved openly, but I knew we were being watched. This place smells like an old gym bag full of dead lizards, Marcus muttered over comms. His voice had that light, casual tone humans used when they were deeply uncomfortable but pretending otherwise. How long are we supposed to be out here? Captain Varn growled, his frilled crest flattening in irritation. Until we return with specimens. No whining, human. Marcus glanced around, then said, not whining. Just noting that we're in a murder forest, with minimal intel, and our extraction window is whenever we crawl back alive. He turned to me, his blue eyes narrowing. Liren, right? You're our tracker? Yes, I replied stiffly, adjusting the scanner on my wrist. I can detect heat signatures within a range of... He cut me off with a nod toward the treeling. Then you might want to start, because something's been pacing us since we landed. That was the first moment I realized Marcus wasn't just running his mouth, he'd seen it too. My scanner confirmed it, multiple heat sources, keeping perfect distance, shadowing our path. We moved on, deeper into the jungle, the ground squelching under our boots. The plants here weren't just poisonous, they were aware. One vine reached lazily toward Captain Varn's tail, retracting only when he hissed at it. Mushrooms pulsed faintly as if breathing. Our first specimen turned out to be a 6-legged insect the size of my torso, clinging to a branch with transparent hooks. Its exoskeleton shimmered like wet oil. The moment I scanned it, it clicked its mandibles and vomited a spray of acidic mist that hissed against my suit's visor. We barely escaped without losing equipment. Marcus didn't flinch. Well, that's lunch sorted. I thought he was joking, but he kept scanning the branches as if actually planning the logistics of cooking it. Hours passed. The deeper we went, the stranger things became. Trees whispered in low vibrations our recorders couldn't fully pick up. In the corner of my vision, I kept catching glimpses of shapes, lithe, long-limbed things that moved on all fours, covered in glistening moss. The moment the sun began to sink, turning the canopy into a blaze of gold and sickly green, Varn ordered us to make camp. That's when the real problem hit. Our portable shelter malfunctioned. The polymer canopy was supposed to autoseal against toxins. Instead, it sagged limply to the ground, half melted. That's it, our engineer Celix muttered. We'll suffocate in our sleep or get eaten by dawn. Marcus didn't even hesitate. I'll handle it. Stay here. And just like that, he walked into the jungle without backup. I thought he was insane. The toxic jungle wasn't just dangerous, it was deliberately dangerous, as if the entire ecosystem had evolved to punish arrogance. You don't wander off alone unless you want to become part of the undergrowth. But an hour later, Marcus came back. His suit was smeared in green sludge, his helmet scratched. Over one shoulder he carried an enormous frond, broad enough to act as a makeshift canopy. In his other hand, he carried two struggling, chittering creatures, fat, furry things with too many eyes. They're docile, he said cheerfully, dumping the creatures near the camp. And from the smell, edible. Oh, and this. He dropped a bundle of vines and fungus lace bark. Burns slow, makes a smoke that keeps the little crawlers away. Learn that from a nest of whatever those are. He nodded toward the treeline, where three glowing eyes blinked at us before melting into the shadows. Varn stared at him, crest lifting in disbelief. You foraged in the toxic jungle? Marcus shrugged. Foraged, traded, maybe intimidated. Point is, we're not dying tonight. That night, under the canopy Marcus built, the jungle seemed almost tolerable. The smoke he made kept away the worst of the pests, and the meat from the furry creatures, cooked over a carefully shielded flame, was surprisingly good, even to my species. As I drifted into a cautious half-sleep, one thought kept gnawing at me: Marcus wasn't just surviving here. He was thriving. And if the jungle was watching us, it was probably wondering the same thing I was: what exactly had the core unleashed on Xyrella 9? The real trouble, though, was just beginning. Because the next morning, the jungle made its first move. The first sound was subtle, like wet leather peeling apart, but in the toxic jungle, even subtle sounds meant danger. I woke instantly, every muscle tense. My visor's readout showed a temperature drop around the perimeter of our makeshift camp. The air was shifting, not from wind but from movement. Marcus was already up, crouched near the edge of the fire's fading smoke. His helmet light was off, his breathing slow, deliberate. Something's testing us, he said quietly over comms. They're smart. They waited until we were full and sleepy. Varn's crest bristled. Defensive formation. Selig scrambled to power up the portable defense grid, a waist-high ring of shock pylons meant to deter wildlife. But before he could activate it, a vine thicker than my arm whipped through the air, snapping one of the pylons in half. Not vines, Marcus muttered. Tentacles. The vine recoiled into the undergrowth, where something massive shifted. My scanner flickered, unable to get a stable read. Whatever it was deliberately scrambling our sensors. That meant intelligence, at least of the predatory kind. Then the chittering started. High-pitched, rapid, coming from multiple directions. Shapes darted through the shadows, the same moss-coated creatures I'd glimpsed the day before, but in greater numbers. Their long limbs bent wrong, their glistening skin pulsing faintly as if breathing through their flesh. They're surrounding us, I said. Not yet, Marcus corrected. But they're about to. He stood, slung his pack over one shoulder, and grabbed the charred remains of last night's cooking fire. Liren on me. We're going to make them think twice. What's the plan? I demanded, falling in beside him. Smoke. Noise. Confusion. He grinned behind his visor. And a little psychological warfare. We moved fast, Marcus scooping fistfuls of resinous fungus from his pack and tossing them into the embers. The reaction was immediate: thick, acrid smoke that clung low to the ground, glowing faintly green in the jungle's filtered light. He kicked the embers toward one flank while I set off my suit's emergency beacon on the other. The predators froze, confused by the shifting scents and flashing light. Then Marcus made a sound I'd never heard from any human, a deep, resonant growl that made even me flinch. It didn't sound like a threat from this planet. It sounded older. Hungrier. The chittering stopped. A dozen pale eyes blinked in unison, and then, without a sound, the creatures melted back into the jungle. Varn exhaled sharply. What was that? Marcus shrugged. Picked it up in Alaska. Bears use it to tell wolves they're not in the mood to share. Those were not wolves, Selleck said flatly. Nope, Marcus agreed. But the principle's the same. We broke camp quickly after that. The predators had retreated, but nothing in the toxic jungle gave up so easily. The air felt heavier, the chittering more distant but constant, like we were being tracked from farther away. Midday brought our first real assignment target, a flowering stalk the Corps called Specimen 4XB, known for its ability to exude paralytic spores. It towered above the canopy, its petals black and slick, dripping with condensation that hissed when it hit the ground. The trick was to collect a sample without inhaling, or touching, the spores. Selleck set up the containment pod while I calibrated the long-range shears. But Marcus walked straight up to the thing, studying it like he was deciding whether to ask it out to dinner. Halt! Varn barked. Get back here! But Marcus didn't move. Instead, he pulled a strip of the same vine he'd used to make our canopy and tossed it toward the flower. The petals twitched, leaning toward the offering. Marcus tossed another. This time, the stalk bent low enough for him to slide the containment sleeve over it and cut a clean sample. Back at the camp, Selleck muttered. You bribed a plant. Marcus shrugged. Plants like this are opportunistic. They'll take easy food over risky food. Humans do the same thing. Varn said nothing, but I caught him watching Marcus more carefully after that. By evening, the jungle threw us another problem, the river. The only viable path to our next target was across a wide, slow-moving channel of black water. The surface was calm, but my scanner picked up massive shapes lurking beneath. We're not swimming that, Selleck said. No, Marcus agreed. We're fishing it. In 20 minutes he had fashioned a crude spear from our sample shears and a broken pylon. Then, without ceremony, he waded knee-deep into the water and waited. 10 minutes later, something big and angry surged upward, jaws lined with inward curving teeth. Marcus sidestepped, drove the spear into the joint of its jaw, and held on as the thing thrashed. When it finally stilled, he grinned and said, Dinner and safe crossing. The carcass, some kind of scaled, six-fin predator, was large enough to form a natural bridge once he anchored it to the bank with vines. We crossed one by one, the jungle quiet except for the distant hiss of steam rising from the meat as it cooled. That night, as we ate roasted river beast under the broad fronds Marcus had gathered, the thought struck me again. The Corps hadn't just underestimated Marcus, they had underestimated humans. Where other species saw a death trap, Marcus saw a puzzle. Where others froze in fear, he adapted. But the jungle wasn't done with us. Not by a long shot. At dawn, the chittering returned, louder, closer, layered with a deeper rumble that made the ground tremble underfoot. The predators had brought reinforcements. And this time, they weren't circling. They were hunting. The tremor in the ground wasn't from footsteps, it was from something heavier, dragging itself through the undergrowth with a patience that made my skin crawl. The chittering predators we'd seen before were visible now, flickering between the trunks and bursts of sickly green light reflected from their eyes. They didn't hide anymore. They wanted us to know they were here. Marcus scanned the treeline, calm in a way that felt unnatural. They're pushing us, he said. Trying to drive us somewhere. Drive us where? Selleck demanded, his voice an octave higher than usual. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Into whatever's making that rumble. Captain Varn's crest fanned out in alarm. Defensive grid, now? Selleck scrambled to assemble the shock pylons again, but Marcus held up a hand. Won't work. Too many angles of attack. We need choke points, not a bubble. Before Varn could argue, the first wave hit. The moss-skinned predators broke from the shadows, moving on all fours with terrifying speed. Their limbs flexed in unnatural ways, allowing them to vault over roots and twist midair. The first landed just meters from me, its breath reeking of rot and ammonia. I fired my wrist-mounted pulsimeter, sending it tumbling backward in a spray of dark fluid, but two more took its place instantly. Marcus didn't retreat. He stepped forward. In his hands he held a length of vine, slick with the same resinous fungus he'd used for the smoke earlier. He swung it in a wide arc, sparks hissing as the resin ignited in the oxygen-rich air. The burning vine snapped and cracked, forcing the predators to hesitate. "They don't like fire," he said. "Good to know." "Human!" Varn barked. "Fall back!" But Marcus was already moving, using the fire as both weapon and lure, baiting the predators into bunching together. When they did, he hurled the burning vine into the air. Mid-flight, he triggered his suit's emergency flash beacon, blinding them in a strobe of white light. Selleck seized the opening, unloading his plasma cutter into the group. The front line fell, twitching. The rest scattered into the trees. For about 10 seconds I thought we'd won. Then the rumble reached us. From the shadows beyond the predators emerged something colossal. Its bulk bent the trees as it passed, skin-plated with bark-like armor mottled in green and brown. Each movement was slow but deliberate, and the tentacles we'd seen earlier unfurled from beneath its plated chest like roots, seeking soil. The predators weren't fleeing from it. They were herding us toward it. Marcus's voice was steady over calms. "That's the apex." The creature's head, if you could call it that, rose above us, its face a mass of tendrils around a single, unblinking eye the size of a cargo hatch. It fixed on us with the same intensity a sniper scopes a target. Varn's voice broke protocol for the first time. "Suggestions?" Marcus's reply was instant. "We make it choke." He knelt, ripping open one of the sealed containment pods. Inside was our sample of specimen 4XB, the paralytic spore flower. Without hesitation, Marcus slashed the containment mesh and smeared the black, tarry pollen along a length of vine. "Liren, on my mark, hit its eye with the flash beacon. Selleck, get ready to cut whatever tentacle comes for me." "What about me?" Varn demanded. Marcus's grin was audible. "Don't die," he charged. The apex roared, a sound like rock grinding against rock, and one massive tentacle lashed toward him. Marcus dodged, rolling under it, then vaulted onto the limb itself. Using the momentum, he sprinted up its length like a climbing vine, the spore-smeared rope coiled in one hand. "Now!" he shouted. I triggered my beacon. The blinding light made the apex rear back, tendrils flaring. Marcus used the moment to swing the vine in a wide loop, jamming it deep into the ring of tendrils around its central eye. The effect was immediate. The spores activated on contact with the creature's moist tissue, releasing a cloud of paralytic dust that coated the tendrils. The apex roared again, but this time it staggered. Selleck's plasma cutter flared, severing a tentacle that had nearly grabbed Marcus. He hit the ground in a controlled roll, landing beside us just as the apex reeled backward into the jungle. The predators hesitated, caught between instinct to defend their apex and fear of the strange, fire-wielding, poison-slinging alien in front of them. Marcus didn't give them a choice. He lit another resin vine and hurled it into their midst. The moment they scattered, we ran. We didn't stop until the chittering was nothing but an echo and the trees thin enough for the sky to show through. My lungs burned, my suit's air supply warning flashing yellow. Varn collapsed against a trunk, crest limp. "You could have killed us all." Marcus shook his head. "I kept us alive." "Big difference." Selleck stared at him. "How did you even think to use the spores like that?" Marcus shrugged, stripping off a section of his suit where acid burns had started to eat through. "Predators are predictable. They expect prey to run. But you give them something they've never seen before." He glanced back at the jungle, where the apex's roars were growing faint. "And suddenly they're the ones running." None of us spoke for a long moment. I realized then that Marcus wasn't just surviving here, he was reshaping the rules of the game. And in the toxic jungle, that was more dangerous than any weapon we carried. But the mission wasn't over. We still had 3 more samples to collect, and now the jungle knew exactly what we were capable of. Which meant the next move would be theirs. And they wouldn't hold back. We were running out of time. The Corps' orders had been clear: 4 viable samples within 5 planetary cycles or don't bother coming back. After the apex encounter, we were 2 samples down, our suits were battered, our supplies were low, and the jungle was learning. On the fourth morning, the air was wrong. It wasn't the thick, oily heat we'd gotten used to. It was cool, crisp, and heavy with a floral sweetness that made my head swim. My scanner flashed warnings I'd never seen before. Air composition altered, unknown agent detected. Marcus tasted the air. Actually tasted it. Sweet. Probably bait. Bait for what? Celix asked nervously. Marcus's answer was grim. Us. The jungle didn't send the moss-skinned predators this time. It sent everything. From the treeline, creatures poured forth in coordinated waves, scaled runners the size of hoverbikes, clouds of winged stingers, centipedes that rattled their plated bodies like warning drums. Overhead, the canopy trembled as massive shapes moved above, breaking branches thicker than my arm. Varn hissed. We can't fight that. No, Marcus agreed. But we can outthink it. He dug into his pack and pulled out our remaining samples, a cluster of thorn pods from the ridge we crossed yesterday, a jelly-like fungus that thrived on decaying biomass, and a half-empty pouch of the paralytic spores. What are you doing? I demanded. Making a bomb, he said simply. In 10 minutes he'd mashed the thorn pods and fungus into a sticky paste, dusted it with spores, and packed it into the hollowed shell of a dead river beast egg we'd found on the bank. He rigged a short ignition fuse from a strip of resin vine and Celix's plasma cutter filament. Lurin, you're on distraction. Varn, you're the thrower. Celix, you light it. The plan was insane, but the odds of surviving without it were worse. We moved to a narrow defile where the jungle funneled all the creatures toward us in a living tide. At the last possible moment, I broke cover, firing my pulse emitter into the swarm's leading edge. The creatures roared and surged faster, their sheer weight shaking the ground. Varn took the egg from Marcus, Celix lit the fuse, and Varn hurled it into the heart of the oncoming mass. The explosion wasn't fire, it was life. The fungus erupted, feeding instantly on the biomass around it, multiplying in seconds into a writhing carpet of tendrils that wrapped around legs, wings, and mandibles. The paralytic spores billowed outward, clinging to fur and scales, dropping the first rank of attackers mid-stride. The thorn pods burst on impact, embedding barbed seeds into anything still moving. The swarm collapsed into chaos. Predators turned on each other, blinded, choking, trapped in the fungal net. The few that made it through were slow and stumbling, easy for us to dispatch. When the dust and spores finally settled, the ground in front of us was an alien graveyard, already sprouting the pale shoots of new fungus. Marcus wiped his visor with a rag. Sample 3 and 4 right there. We collected the fungal growth and thorn pods with care, sealing them into the last of our containment units. My hands shook as I worked, not from fear, but from the realization that we had actually done it. We'd survived the toxic jungle, taken what we came for, and lived to tell about it. The trek back to the extraction point was slow but uneventful. The jungle didn't follow. Maybe it was licking its wounds. Maybe it was thinking. When the core shuttle touched down, the recovery officer's mandibles clicked in disbelief at our haul. For samples. No fatalities. How? Varn didn't answer. Celix didn't answer. I just looked at Marcus. He grinned, shrugging off his pack. You send us into a death trap. I treated it like a dinner party. The officer stared. A dinner party? Sure. You bring something to share, you don't insult the host, and you leave with a few souvenirs. He patted the containment pods. Mission accomplished. On the shuttle ride back, I kept glancing at Marcus. I'd seen 100 species survive hostile environments, but only humans seemed to change them in the process. The toxic jungle had tried to kill him, and instead, it had fed him, given him materials, and, if the chittering silence as we left was any sign, learned to keep its distance. Maybe that was why humans scared the galaxy. They didn't just endure the impossible. They made it work for them. As the shuttle broke atmosphere, Marcus leaned back, eyes closed, already talking about how he could cook the river beast if we ever came back. Varn groaned. We are never coming back. Marcus just smiled. Never say never. I think I made some friends in there. I didn't doubt it. And that, somehow, was the most unsettling part of all. Subscribe to the Void Narratives for more stories of humanity doing the impossible, and making it look easy.